The entrance to the Trousseau Valley may seem like stepping into a place associated only with tranquility, peace and safety. But beyond its picturesque nature, the Trousseau Valley is also a place full of history, where one can encounter ruins of settlements and fortresses that bear witness to the turbulent history of the region. Right after leaving the Kasari Canyon, the first travertines from the mineral springs of the area stand out against the backdrop of devilishly green mountain slopes. Travertine is a porous sedimentary rock resembling marble, mainly composed of the calcite and aragonite. It appears everywhere there is a limestone base and appropriate water sources. From here, the majestic Kazbek is just about 15 kilometers to the north in a straight line. The peak, which forms the northern wall of the valley, rises to 3,350 meters. To the south, the valley is bordered by ridges that cut through the sky even higher. These bare vertical cliffs rise up to 3,900 meters. The orange-red travertines not only catch the eye but also mark their presence with the scent of sulfur that fills the air, so you can experience this valley with all your senses. The Raded Meadow is the only road leading toward the undefined border between Georgia and South Ossetia, marked by a checkpoint at the foot of a hill, on which the ruins of the Zakagori fortress stand. Before reaching the checkpoint, I passed through the village of Katrisi. Katrisi, like other settlements in the Trousseau Valley, was primarily inhabited by Kists, an ethnic group related to Chechens and Ingush who settled in the region in the 19th century. Earlier, this area was also home to the indigenous people of Georgia, but demographic changes occurred with the migrations of Caucasian people and subsequent displacement in the 20th century. The former residents, the Ossetians, began to leave these lands in 1992 after the war in South Ossetia, and their exodus ended in 2008 after the 5-day Russo-Georgian War. That was when Georgia decided to reclaim control over the separatist region. After 16 years of apparent peace between Georgia and South Ossetia, during which both sides regularly shelled each other's positions, the fighting resumed. The Ossetians were aided by Russia and pushed Georgian forces out of the disputed territory. The underlying cause of the conflict was linked to events surrounding the collapse of the Soviet Union. During the USSR times, South Ossetia was part of the Georgian SSR but had the status of an autonomous oblast, until 1989, when Moscow authorities decided that the autonomous region would be annexed to the North Ossetian SSR, a republic in Russia. This decision enraged Georgia, which was already making plans to separate from the USSR and create an independent state. However, the Georgian plans were not in line with South Ossetia, which wanted to unite with the Russian part of Ossetia. As a result, the Ossetians proclaimed the Republic of South Ossetia and declared independence. Georgia did not accept this separation and sent its military forces. Fighting lasted with varying intensity for nearly a year. In early 1992, a ceasefire agreement was reached between Georgia and Russia, under which South Ossetia remained within Georgia's administrative borders. The actual control over these lands was lost by Georgia only in 2008 after the war. Despite the defeat, Georgia still maintains that the area belongs to them and is only occupied by Russia. Before reaching the checkpoint, I passed the male monastery of the 12 Apostles and then the village of Abano with its female monastery. The name Abano in Georgian means bath or spa. It is a direct reference to the numerous hot mineral springs in the vicinity. Like Katrisi, the village was abandoned in the second half of the 20th century. Modern Abano is a deserted place, but even now you can encounter shepherds making use of the natural resources of the valley. From here, you can't venture any farther without a permit. At the time, I didn't know that it was possible to apply for one directly at the border checkpoint, something I later took advantage of in another valley. It is a shame because the border zone offers more breathtaking spots. The Suwatisi and Mna gorges, the sheer walls of Ulkanjaru Church and the Jimara Massif, volcanoes and Lake Kalitsadi. All of this lies hidden in this contested area. But just beyond the checkpoint, the proud ruins of Zakagori Fortress rise against the landscape. Zakagori played a crucial defensive role as early as the 13th century. It was a watchtower that protected Georgia's northern borders from invasion by tribes from the north. Its position on a rocky hill at an elevation of 2,233 meters above sea level provided a strategic advantage, a clear view of the entire valley and access to trade routes across the Caucasus. In its heyday, it was a comprehensive structure with watchtowers, defensive walls, and residential buildings. Zakagori is also believed to have served as a center of local power when Kevi, the present-day region, marked the northern frontier of the kingdom or Kartli. The scattered ruins of several towers and two-story stone houses contribute to the site's unique vastness, creating an intriguing contrast between human-made structures and the wild natural surroundings. After a moment of contemplation over the region's nature and history, it was time to find a charming and preferably deserted spot to camp for the night. Driving through Ketrisi, I came across shepherds herding their cattle in enclosures. Since this was the only road through the village, I had to share it with the locals, which made the journey take a bit longer. Wanting to make the most out of the beautiful weather, especially the clear night sky, I decided it was a perfect opportunity for Holy Grail time-lapse. However, since this would mean leaving my equipment outdoors all night without supervision, I didn't want to set up by the road and opted to drive up a meadow for a better spot. I veered off the road and drove along the slope for a while, and then started to drive uphill. The meadow, however, turned out to be so waterlogged that I barely managed to climb the hill. Fearing I might get stuck, I decided to back out before things got worse, but I ended up like 2 days ago. So, once again, I had to launch a recovery operation. This time, I set up my 3D recording rig, and the result can be seen in the next video from the Immersive Georgia series. The effect makes it feel like you're standing just a meter away from the car, watching the entire recovery unfold from the front row. You can't get closer to the action than that. I've also included some of that footage here to show you the kind of challenges you sometimes face when you overthink things. The road was barely 5 meters to the left of the car, seriously. But the mounds of the earth likely left over from installing the utility poles combined with the waterlogged ground turned this obstacle into something impossible, or at least too much for low-speed and heavy overland vehicle. So once again, I had to rely on the winch. Thankfully, the poles were there. Take a look at how the rear of the car literally sinks into the bog. The wheels were spinning helplessly with absolutely no traction, and the winch was doing all the work. And, well, the poor mudguard didn't make it out unscarred this time. Getting to this spot wasn't a guarantee of success either. Everywhere I looked, there were puddles of water, and I kept wondering how deep they might be. So, after freeing myself from the utility pole, I didn't even bother rewinding the winch line onto the drum. I just wrapped it around the bumper, figuring I might need it again, and decided to try getting out under my own power. Once again, I made it. Instead of setting up the gear for a time-lapse, I got busy with some cleanup tasks. The winch line, loosely coiled around the bumper, needed rewinding onto the drum, so I got right to it. This is where the ability to connect the controller to the fender comes in handy, allowing me to monitor how the line winds up. I've always wondered how this works with the setups where the winch is hidden behind the bumper. How do you ensure the line doesn't wind unevenly to one side? I've had plenty of situations, especially when recovering at an angle, where the line would pile up on one side and I'd have to force it to spread across the drum evenly, sometimes manually or even using my foot while winching. You will see an example of this in the footage from Turkey. It seems impossible to manage with hidden winches, which is why those solutions have always intrigued me. The surroundings here were some of the most beautiful I've ever had the chance to camp in. The warm hues of the setting sun, the lush greenery, the crisp mountain air, and the silence. Well, I know that the constant murmur of the river filling the valley isn't exactly silence, but it wasn't overwhelming as it can sometimes be with a raging current that feels like the river is practically screaming beside you. Here, everything blended into perfect harmony, creating an immense sense of inner peace. After removing the broken mudguard, stowing away accessories, and covering the winch, the next task was to prepare my hotel for hosting its overnight guests. Raise the roof, set up the awning on the poles, unfold the table and chair, bring the stove and dishes outside, and it was time to get started on preparing a royal dinner. Tonight's special? Steaks, of course. And sure, maybe I didn't manage to shoot a time-lapse that night, but astrophotography in this spot was an absolute delight. In the morning, I got to work repairing the mudguard that I had torn off during the last recovery. I had deliberately left it for the next day so the mud could dry and be scraped off instead of smeared around. The plan was simple and one I had used before, secure it with zip ties. This time, however, the mudguard had torn along its entire length, so the operation required more precision. Fortunately, I had strong, heavy-duty zip ties on hand, so I started drilling holes. First, I had to grab my multi-tool, as it wasn't in the holster on my belt where it usually is. Then I had to fetch a mat, because I hadn't brought it earlier. The old saying, "What you don't have in your head, you will have to make up for with your legs," couldn't have been more fitting here.
Training mat always work.
After drilling the holes in the mudguard, it was time to make corresponding holes in the part that was still attached to the mudguard mount. While this was a temporary fix, it didn't mean it could be done carelessly, so proper alignment and measurements were necessary. Meanwhile, my canine companion, who had come to visit, decided to take a nap on the other side of the car.
It's pretty tight, which is good.
As you can see, the mudguard already had its fair share of scars from previous adventures, but as is often the case with makeshift fixes, if it works, it stays. And so those scars remained. Now another battle wound was about to join them. The last cut didn't work out. The rubber was already brittle and ended up breaking. Because of that, I had to secure the zip tie to a structural hole in the frame instead.
Yeah, done. Better than nothing.
Then it was time to take a closer look at the surroundings. We start at an altitude of around 2150 meters, where alpine meadows dominate the landscape, covered in grasses and wildflowers. There are no trees to be found here, and from above the entire area looks like blanket in the delicate moss. Up to an altitude of about 3000 meters, the slopes are still covered in vegetation, though noticeably harsher and more sparse. Deeper into the valley, you can spot the travertines too. Orange and red layers indicate the presence of iron and sulfur. The southern ridges, meanwhile, present an entirely different spectacle. Looking at this area, it's hard to imagine that hundreds of millions of years ago this region lay at the bottom of the ancient Tethys Ocean. Over that time, organic matter accumulated on the seabed, and in low oxygen conditions, its decomposition was limited. This process resulted in the formation of black shells and marls, giving the slopes their graphite-like color. During the formation of the Caucasus, approximately 25 to 5 million years ago, the Arabian tectonic plate began to press against the Eurasian, causing the rock layers to rise and fold. These immense tectonic forces deformed the strata, bending and wrapping them into folds, which is why the layered structures are now visible as tilted rock bands. Finally, the relentless forces of erosion have continuously shaped the area, giving the valley its final dramatic character. Returning to the valley itself, one of the most striking elements of the landscape is the captivating network of red streams running along the left bank of the Terek River. The source is one of the valley's most peculiar and iconic features, attracting visitors eager to witness it firsthand: Abano Karst Lake. The lake's turquoise waters, surrounded by a rugged mountain landscape, appear serene, yet they conceal a deadly secret. The lake was formed by an underground stream rich in carbon dioxide, which escapes to the surface through Jurassic-era carbonate rocks. This causes the lake to boil as bubbles of carbon dioxide burst through its surface. The area surrounding the lake is permeated with such high concentration of the gas that it can be life-threatening, making this spot as dangerous as it is mesmerizing. The fascinating red streams flowing from the lake, snaking down the slopes like the earth veins, owe their hypnotic color to sediments rich in iron oxides. When these oxides come into contact with water and air, they oxidize, creating the rusty hues that define the streams. This is exactly what this incredibly beautiful yet brutal valley looks like. Geological processes carving the landscape over millions of years have given it a unique atmosphere, to which humanity has sought to adapt for centuries. It is a place that captivates and humbles, reminding us of how small we are in the face of nature's untamed power. While observing nature in the valley, I noticed a herd of grazing cows, a common sight in this area. But as I looked closer, I spotted a young boy confidently seated on the back of a beautiful horse. His task was simple yet deeply intertwined with the rhythm of life in this place, watching over the cows grazing on the steep green pastures. Armed with nothing more than a sturdy stick, he wielded it like a teacher with a pointer, gently herding the cows that wandered too far in search of tasty patches of grass on the lush slopes. The boy and his horse moved as one, navigating the uneven terrain with a grace that reflected their close bond and shared experience. The horse's coat, muted grey-brown, seemed to blend seamlessly into the surroundings. Only the boy's bright blue shirt stood out against the vibrant green backdrop of the hills. Together, they moved confidently unfazed by the rugged landscape. The horse's step seemed almost choreographed, responding effortlessly to the boy's subtle guidance. From time to time, the valley echoed with the boy's call, blending harmoniously with the cow's lowing and the murmur of the mountain river. His voice was strong and assured, a testament to his focus and dedication to the task. As he swung his stick in the air to redirect a particularly stubborn cone back to the group, his movements were fluid and deliberate, like a conductor orchestrating the symphony of the valley. With so many cows to manage, there were always strugglers testing the boy's patience, but he remained calm and consistent, spotting the wanderers and gently guiding them back to the herd. Occasionally, he paused, scanning the entire herd with the keen vigilance of a true guardian. His small frame carried a maturity shaped by the daily responsibilities he shouldered. As I watched this scene unfold, I was struck by its timelessness. It felt like a glimpse into a way of life unchanged for generations. A delicate harmony between humans and nature, where survival and balance go hand in hand. Here, amid the majestic Caucasian mountains, the boy and his horse embodied the spirit of the people who call this land home. Resilient, resourceful, and deeply connected to the earth. After finishing the task I had planned for the morning, mainly cleaning the windshield to ensure an unobstructed view from the dashcam, unlike in the previous episode and beginning of this one, I set off on the next leg of the journey. Unfortunately, the camera started acting up and the footage came out unusually dark and filled with artifacts. As a result, the next 5 minutes of the video, which in reality covered the entire drive to the next stop, recorded in lower quality. I hope you can forgive me for this. As you can see, this valley was filling up with tourists. Some hikers who likely got dropped off near the bridge in the village of Kvemo Krokana and began their trek from there, and others who decided to tackle an additional 3 kilometers of the canyon on wheels. Thankfully, on my way back, I didn't encounter anyone unfamiliar with the rules of passing on narrow cliffside roads, so that stretch of the journey went smoothly without surprises. Afterward, it was back to the asphalt of the Georgian military road, heading towards Stepantsminda, a town near the iconic 14th century Gergeti Trinity Church. But before reaching my destination, I made an unexpected stop at the Pansheti pool. This completely natural open-air pool, fed by mineral spring, is located 2.5 kilometers from Kazbegi. To clarify, Kazbegi is actually Stepantsminda. The name Kazbegi was a Soviet area designation introduced in 1925 to honor Gabriel Kazbegi, who helped suppress an anti-Russian revolution in Georgia. In 2006, the authorities decided to restore the original name in honor of Saint Stephen. Taking advantage of the opportunity to refill my drinking water supply with mineral water, I filled up a 20-liter container. The taps, originally meant to dispense the water, had long since lost their functionality due to mineral buildup, but water always finds its way, and I refilled my supply from one of these natural outlets. The pool itself, fed by the mineral spring water channeled through the large pipe you may have seen, is ice cold and wonderfully refreshing on the hot summer days. Its location offers a beautiful view of the town of Kazbegi and the distant mountains, making it a worthwhile stop before heading off to the next set of attractions waiting just around the corner. I'm driving into Stepan Gmina exactly as I did 9 years ago. Right away, I noticed the difference. Concrete now covers what used to be gravel roads. Just as I start thinking the entire town has undergone a transformation, it quickly becomes clear that's not the case. It also turns out that the navigation system here is almost useless, often directing you in the streets that are impossible to drive through. As a result, I spent some time swerving through the town before finally finding the right road. This road itself is another surprise. A perfectly smooth stretch of asphalt where I once drove over rugged terrain now winds its way like a grey ribbon all the way to the top, leading me directly to the church. Since the road now allows access for regular cars, not like in 2015. The site has become a major tourist spot and the parking area is completely packed. Again, not like in 2015. I start wondering if I'll be able to recreate the photo I took here of my Discovery 3 9 years ago, but as I look around, I notice a car pulling out, leaving a gap that offers just enough room to drive up to the hill. I seize the opportunity and prepare for the climb. The incline is steep, very steep, so I switch into low gear and slowly, steadily, I make my way up to the spot where, almost a decade ago, I admired these breathtaking views. In 2015, Mount Kazbek was hidden behind a thick layer of rolling clouds. Gergeti Trinity Church stood impressively in the foreground while the majestic peak as a backdrop was missing. This time, the clouds touched only the very summit, making the photo a recreation of that iconic shot. Truly spectacular. The Gergeti Trinity Church is a 14th century Orthodox Christian church located on the slope of Mount Kazbek at an elevation of 2170 meters above sea level, offering breathtaking views of the surrounding mountains, including the majestic Mount Kazbek itself. According to legend, the church was built by a monk named Gabriel, inspired by a vision of the Holy Trinity on a nearby rock. Officially, it was erected as a symbol of Georgia's rebirth and unity after liberation from Mongol rule. Over centuries, it bore witness to turbulent history, but its once inaccessible location spared it from destruction. It's one of the few churches in Georgia that remains in its original state, free from significant alterations. During the Soviet era, it even served as a high-altitude shelter for mountaineers. The complex comprises the main church, a bell tower, a council building and defensive walls. In 2018, The Telegraph ranked the Gergeti Trinity Church among the most beautiful churches in the world. Part of the unique experience of visiting this extraordinary place is encountering the horses along the road leading to the church. Accustomed to people and vehicles, they are unfazed by traffic, often forcing drivers to pause, an opportunity to capture a few charming photographs. Over time, they've become an integral part of the landscape and local life. Some belong to locals who use them for transportation across the mountains terrain or offer tourist horseback rides near the church. Others roam freely along the road, grazing on the natural vegetation. Their presence adds a picturesque quality to the route, enhancing the traditional mountain town atmosphere of the Stepan Gmina area. If you would like to feel as though you are right there among them, check out my series Immersive Georgia, where in episode 4 I take you straight into the action, including a moment of sharing threads with these beautiful creatures. this brief visit to the Gergeti Trinity Church, I set off towards the mountain village of Utah. I passed through the Snow Valley, which apparently features stone heads for viewing I had no idea existed, so I didn't stop there. And again, the gravel road we traveled on a decade ago, where we once paused to enjoy the unspoiled beauty, has been replaced by asphalt. Unfortunately, that road doesn't look the same anymore either. How it has changed, you will find out in the next episode as I capture it on my return journey. Honestly, if I hadn't been following the same GPS track I recorded in 2015, I might have questioned whether I was on the right path at all.
I don't want to go to party, I want to go farther.
After crossing the small bridge over the Snoqualmie River in the village of Utah, my progress was halted by a traffic cone placed in the middle of the road. On the left, there was a campsite, and the man managing it was admittedly trying to convince me to stop there. He even attempted to claim that driving farther wasn't allowed, and that if I did, I would have to turn back soon anyway because there was nothing ahead. But I wasn't about to give up, knowing that stunning wild landscapes were waiting for me just a bit farther along the way. In truth, I had hoped to drive much farther than we managed back in 2015. At that time, we reached a point where the river had washed away the road, leaving us unable to continue through the remote terrain. Driving a heavily overloaded disco, pushing ahead felt entirely irrational, so we turned back. But now, in the Prowler, I felt more confident, though I was still aware that it wasn't in the perfect condition. Looking at the number of cars parked along the road and trying to match the surroundings to my memories of that previous trip, I started to worry that this place had lost its wild charm as well. The presence of power lines, a supposedly gravel road that felt far too civilized, tourists hauling suitcases, and newly built structures dotting the hillsides, all of it felt deeply unsettling and nothing like the place I remembered. Still, it was hard to believe this area could have changed so drastically over the years. I kept driving, hoping that this level of development was limited to this stretch of the route and that farther ahead things would return to the way I remembered them. Surely, the places etched so vividly in my memory must lie beyond this point. But how wrong I was. Only while driving I finally realized that Georgia, the one I knew, no longer exists. The road I was now driving on looked like this back then. It was an entirely different world. Honestly, it felt like you had reached the very edge of it. A decade ago, this area had a raw, wild, almost mystical aura, untouched by time or human interference. The uneven, narrow road winding alongside a rushing stream seemed to blend seamlessly with the landscape. The absence of visible barriers, artificial structures, or smoothed-out surfaces gave the impression of authenticity. This was a place where nature sets the rules and humans were merely guests. The green slopes of the mountains and lush vegetation seemed to envelop us, creating an atmosphere of tranquility and harmony with the surroundings. Every twist and turn of the road promised a new discovery, and every stone demanded focus and attention. The complete lack of modern conveniences made the journey utterly unique. It's hard to describe the disappointment I felt when I realized we had lost this place forever. Now, a smooth, reinforced road lined with the concrete markers cuts through the area as it's shouting, "We've thumbed nature!" Sure, the road has become more accessible, but at the cost of its magic. This order lines, while practical, strips the place of its original charm. The landscape has lost something intangible, a sense of wildness that once inspired both awe and respect. As I drove, I couldn't help but wonder how much we lose when we try to make such places more convenient. Wouldn't it be better sometimes to leave them in their natural, mysterious state, forcing us to put in the effort and feel humbled by the experience? A decade ago, this was more than just scenery. It was a story about untamed nature and a journey that wasn't merely a drive but an experience. Now, it's just another place of civilized world where instead of exploring, we simply pass by, oblivious of the magic of the place we're leaving behind. My thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a whistle. It was a military patrol. calling me over. But more about those experiences in the next episode. Stay tuned.